Welcome everyone. This is the first training module for Valencia 2019, the first of the online training modules, and I'll be touching on people, product, and process. If you have any questions, I'll leave some time at the end, or if there's anything, just give me a shout and we can go through it as we're going through. So just an overview of what the module will be covering. Mainly, a lot of the work we do in EYP comes around people, product, process, and then you might have been asked at some point, which one do you think is the most important, or which one do you think you should prioritize? And then what this module will try and address is that it doesn't really have to be a choice, and that if you take into account the right things, it could even be a balance of all three. So when planning activities for your delegates, if we see that from the perspective of a chairperson, but also in any other group activity, there are some things that you need to consider about your people and how you plan your process so that you deliver your desired product. Then the aims of this module will be to touch on why we do things, what are the things that we need to deliver, and how we're going to deliver them. It will give you a chance to think of your goals for the activities rather than the activities themselves, and then make you aware of the different types of working, the types of learning that you can consider when planning. And then just an overview of the things we'll be covering today. We'll be starting off with a few key definitions of what we actually mean by product, people, and process. We'll then be going into more detail on the why we're doing things. So the product in that sense, how we do things in terms of the things that you need to consider for the people and how you should be doing things in a sense to cater for the things of your people. Then touching on the types of learnings and the different types of learners, as we've said. Then going on to the process and what it is that we're actually delivering, and then just summarizing with them some key messages. So yeah, so the key question that we'll answer today would be, how do you tailor your process to your people to achieve the desired product? So how your process beginning to end should ideally be addressing the needs of your people, either their emotions or their skills, their knowledge, and then how you get to that end product might have different milestones. So your process is comprised of a different set of tasks that you need to deliver, and therefore ideally that process should be tailored in a way so that you can result and deliver your end product for your people. So if we define the product, the people, and the process, so thinking about the people to begin with, these are some of the elements that we can try to put against people to try and give them some more context in terms of what it is that we actually mean. So starting with the skills, what skills do the people in your team or your group have? In the case of your delegates, some of them might be good at research, some of them might have a talent for seeing things from different perspectives, and then if we take that outside the sharing context, some of them might be good at working with spreadsheets, some of them might be good at talking, some of them might be good at gathering large pieces of information and then narrowing that down. So it's important to be aware of the different things that the people in your team are good at. Then the knowledge they have. So in a sharing context, what is the academic knowledge that your people have? Have they read the topic overview? Have they completed the activities you've shared? Do they have an understanding of the topic? Do they have an understanding of the challenges? What is it that they know? And more importantly, what is it that they don't know? Then personal preferences. Some people like to take a nap when they're tired. Others like to power through just to get it done and get it out the way. Some like to work to deadlines. Some other like to have free time and the time to think about things and deliver something else. Some like to have someone to talk to when they're stressed. Some might just want to take the time and space to reflect on what just happened, and so on. So these are the personal preferences in terms of how they approach a task, but also in how they interact with other people. And then their needs. What is it that they need to have? Again, going back to a support system, or having someone to talk to having the need to leave the session with having developed certain skills, or having met people, or having feeling that they've achieved something. So that is something that you need to consider as well. So that's the first element out of the three: people. Then moving on to the process. So a process is more or less what you're trying to do, and sometimes you can't really affect that in many ways in terms of what it is that you're trying to deliver. You will still need to have a pre-session element, and then you will still need to go through team building and through committee work. Therefore, the key milestones that you're trying to deliver in order to get your end product might not change. How you plan and deliver those milestones might change though, and we'll touch on that later on. And then going on to the product as a final thing, a product that we all need to deliver as a chairperson in a committee room would be a resolution, but then what other elements are you trying to deliver, and what are other things that might not be tangible and they might not be written on a piece of paper, but what things do you want them to take away? What is it that you want to achieve when you reach that end point? So if we actually start from the third point, the product, and we try and think of the purpose and think of the aims. What is it that you're trying to achieve? So ideally, your product should match that overall aim. If you set an aim for yourself to make everyone culturally aware and develop that sense of cultural differentiation between people and that variation, you need to keep that in mind. And when you're planning your process, you need to have that end goal in mind. Then what else it could be that you're trying to achieve? That could range from making them understand their skills, making them understand European politics, living the session as an active citizen, things that go beyond the simple things that we have to deliver for the purpose of the session. So what other outcomes would you like your work in a group to have? Then moving on to the how. So we've touched on these four elements. So utilizing the skills of your people, their knowledge, their personal preferences, and caring for their needs. So bearing in mind how different people are wired and how different people like to behave and are and they tend to behave differently. How can you make sure in your space and in your power of influencing the process that you're trying to deliver, how do you make sure that you have a piece for everyone, that your process and what you're doing day to day accommodates for the different for the differences in your people? And then if we think of, if we take that out and look at the theory for a second. So Kolb's cycle of learning. So Kolb is an American educational theorist, and in 1984, he published his theory on the different types of learning and the different types of learners. So according to Kolb, in order to have an effective learning cycle, you need to go through 4 different stages. The first one being experience. So whether that means basically receiving a stimulus that generates a new feeling or a new emotion, or just basically receiving new information. That's the first step to the cycle. Then the next step would be reflecting on that, thinking about what that experience actually meant, what that feeling could be. And then sometimes there might be some discrepancy as to what the experience actually was, but how it makes different people feel about that experience. And then the third step being conceptualization. So after you've actually experienced something and you've thought of it, putting that into a context that means something for you. How does that influence you as a person? And then as a final bit, how do you test that? And how do you turn that into something meaningful? So the experience that you've had and the thought process behind it, and how that and what that means for you as a person, how has that influenced your next steps and your actions going forward? And therefore, what have you learned from that cycle that you can take into the next cycle of learning, if you like? So the official terms for that being concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. So later on, we'll be matching those into some simpler terms so that we can then derive the different types of learners. So based on what we've said, in terms of concrete experience, so these are the 4 stages I've just talked through. Would anyone like to have a go in terms of trying to match these up as to what that means for if we take it down to a much simpler element?
I would say concrete experience would be feeling.
Yeah.
And conceptualization would be thinking about what you just felt. And then observing would probably be watching.
Yeah.
And then experimenting would be doing.
Okay. There we go. So exactly as Sam said, just going through that cycle, what that actually means for if we take it down to simpler terms. And then if we try and put that into a map to derive the different types of learners. So there are, so different people like to learn in different ways. And then depending on where you see it on that chart, you might be inclined to learning more in one way rather than other. It's important to note that all people receive learning from all different types of learning, and no one just fits into one box. It's just that these boxes might give you more of a direction in terms of what are the different activities and what are the different areas that you need to touch on in order to make sure that everyone has had the chance to learn in a way that is more inclined and preferred in their own environment and based on their own background. So if we just touch on each of these types in just giving an overview. So starting with the left top corner of the accommodator. So these are people who like to do and feel, and then these are also people who, so they learn from doing in a sense. So they need to have an interactive activity and they need to actually practice and get that stimulus of learning. Then moving on to the diverger of the feeling and watching. So that a diverger would be good in terms of getting different points of view because of their of their ability to reflect on things. Then they can see things from different points of view. Then an assimilator is more of someone who they watch and think, and that's how they learn more. So they can because of their ability to look at different things and get a wider view of things, then that means they can have a wide-ranging information, and therefore they can gather that and they can process through big pieces of information. And then the last one, the converger, people who think and do. So their element would be problem solving. So having a very specific giving them a very specific problem to solve or a very specific element would be a good type of learning for them. Then if we look through another theory, so on the same context, we could also relate the VARC theory, so the different stimulus that you can give to different people so that they learn in different ways. So some are more, they learn better through visual stimuli, so looking at things and therefore interacting in that way. Some others are more inclined to hearing things, so for example, listening to a talk or basically gathering that information in a sense that they don't have to, it's readily available for them in a hearing way. Then kinesthetic, so people that is basically feel and touch. So what are the things that they can do and engage in? And then reading, pretty much self-explanatory. So you could match these elements back to the chart we were looking before, and then that could give you an element of what are the different areas that how can we combine different things? So if someone likes to touch and feel, so more on the kinesthetic type of learning and experiencing, and then that goes back to doing and feeling. So how can you combine these things together, basically? And then if we step back into our 3 elements, so the process, as we've said, the what might be fixed. So you still need to deliver these elements. How you deliver these elements is completely up to you. So ensuring that the activities actually have a purpose and ensuring that these purpose matches your overall aim and that you have a good level of engagement and interaction with your people. Then next bit would be, so what I thought we could do is try and match some activities that we usually have in committee work. So looking at this in a more sharing capacity as an example, trying to match some of the activities that we do during committee work to the different types of learners, just to give you a feeling of what are the different areas that I could do or the different activities that I could incorporate into my committee work or into any other project, in a sense, to make sure that I have something for everyone. So what I've done in these next slide, I've already populated some examples on here just to try and give an idea. So I'll briefly talk through each one of these. And then if you have any other questions or if you think of any other activities, then we could potentially use those as examples to try and match and see which of these boxes they fit in. So for example, stakeholder role play, getting them to actually get into the shoes of a stakeholder or getting them to represent a stakeholder during committee work might make them get that active experimentation, because some topics might be relevant and therefore they can feel they can act in their own role and they are one of the stakeholders. Some other topics might be far away from their everyday reality, therefore they are not able to understand, or they might not be able to understand the complexity of some of the legal institutions or the actual European Union elements. So that might be a good chance for them to get into the shoes and actually experience it, the whole element. Then idea generation. So as we said, someone in the top right quadrant of that chart would be good at gathering a lot of ideas, and they're very creative in terms of seeing things and having a big input into how we do things. And then also they could also be good in the role of a devil's advocate, so their ability to see things from a different perspective. Then that gives a chance to for them to actually try and see the problem from a different perspective. And that could be valuable to the committee because they get the chance to cross-check and validate their ideas as well. Then you could also share, so for people who like to watch and think, you could share in advance videos and TED Talks and webinars that they can attend, that they can basically watch in advance of coming to the session. Therefore, they get a chance to receive information and learn more and develop their academic knowledge. So going back to that, to one of the elements that we spoke about, people. So giving them a chance to develop their knowledge in some other ways other than reading the topic overviews. Then also in that same element, grouping of ideas. So as we said, some might be able to generate huge pieces of information and give you lots of ideas, but then how you actually bring that together and make sense of it and group the things that could go together and solve the same problem, people in this group would be able to do that. Then moving on, idea refinement. So once you've actually grouped everything in your committee work, some people would be good at finalizing those ideas and making sure that they were refined and they look at the details and they address all the different issues so that you don't leave any holes in your resolution going forward. And then just a final element towards the more active experimentation and doing, so having theme-related team building or giving them scenarios about the topic during team building that they can address. So having a discussion-based question tailored to your particular topic, if that's a moral topic, or problem solving if that requires them to do different things. So that could also be a good transition from one stage of your process to another one. Are there any questions at this point in terms of for any of these activities, or anything else that you wanted to add? No? Okay, good. So we can then move on. Just to summarize the key messages. So as I said earlier, it doesn't necessarily have to be one of the three. So sometimes you might be asked which one is the most important, and then people are the most important on your process, and then the product doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, if you do everything right, or if you take into account the right elements, then you could be achieving a balance for all. So the process should therefore cater for the needs of your people, and what they're trying to achieve, what their own goal is, but also what their own preferences are, and skills and knowledge. And then on the why you do things, it doesn't always have to be what you're told that this needs to be. It doesn't always have to be just getting the basics out the way. That can always be influenced by a higher perspective and your overall goal. And then just to summarize everything, so we've looked at the why, so that should influence your product, as we just said. Then how you do things, that can be influenced by your people as a whole. So both the VARC theory, that's an element that you can use, but also the different types of learners and the types of learning. Just trying to think what activities you can create to make sure that everyone has an activity they can be involved in, and they all do things that they enjoy. Because even if we take a step back from that particular theory, not everyone enjoys learning in the same way, and not everyone enjoys learning in the same environment. And therefore, it's important to try and have something for everyone in your process. So in the final elements, so some of the activities we've already discussed. So that was the overall what I wanted to deliver with the module. Thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you found this useful. So yeah, thank you.